Welcome to Training Tuesday here in Coach Connect Hub. It is Tuesday, January 23rd, and my guest trainer today is Coleen Greco. Coleen is the Joyologist, the nutrition and mindset coach extraordinaire. Coleen, thank you for being here, and take it away, my friend.
Thank you, really, Sam, for having me, and Carrie, of course. And for everyone joining, I really appreciate you taking the time out of what I'm sure is an overscheduled, overtaxed day if you're an entrepreneur. So I appreciate it. I am a joyologist, and I help women, I coach men too, but predominantly women, to feel amazing in their own skin, really love the skin that they're in, develop that firm foundation of self-love, while also helping them to retire limiting beliefs. And those are those stories, we'll get into that a little bit more in a second, but those are those stories that are keeping you feeling stuck. And so we get rid of those stories, creating space for more abundance. And I'm really happy to be here. So I will just share away. You don't need to look at my desktop. Um, and really, okay, there we go. I wanted to get rid of the little taskbar. Everything I talk about is firmly rooted in joy. And so, I believe that when you do that, you can see your full potential. Maybe not always the path there, but you know that there's, a greater good out there for you. And we'll dive into more of that in a second. So you can drop a few words in the chat. I know we're going to save Q&A for later, excuse me. But just to emphasize, what you came here for, so I can make sure I'm touching on the most salient points. So I'll go ahead and jump through the next slide. But, if you get a second, you can kind of put a few, fleeting thoughts in the chat. That would be wonderful. And let's start off with my story to give you a little bit of an idea of how I became a joyologist, because it is not a natural segue from my corporate IT career. I spent 26 years in corporate IT marketing leadership. So as you can imagine, like, how did this joyologist thing come about? And really it came through family trauma. My son, that picture over there on the left, the one to my right, when he was 10, had a suicide attempt. And as you might imagine, that really crushed all of us as a family. And really, we're left with more questions than answers. And in the early days, it was that inability of me to cope that led to significant weight gain, which is this picture you can see in the middle. And I had never really had a weight problem. I think, like most people, we have, 5 or 10 pounds to lose, and we think that's like cute. I didn't think it was cute. In this picture, I'm 52 pounds heavier than the picture on the right. And I let food and alcohol numb my emotions for a number of months. And when it came to how am I going to heal my family? How are we going to move on from this? We didn't have any doctors, no therapists that would talk to us. And for everyone listening, I live in Boston. So how is that even possible that there are no doctors and therapists that would talk to us? Well, I believe it's because he was 10 and nobody wanted to get their hands dirty with that type of a case. And so as a result, my mess turned into my message. 4.5 years later, from this after picture I have here on the right, I've now helped hundreds of women and men lose thousands of pounds. But really, what I'm most proud of is that they've all established a firm foundation of self-love, realized their own self-worth, and retired all of those limiting beliefs, those stories that I was talking about earlier. So really proud of that. And I'm honored to be here today. And what I want to impress upon you really is that joy is your birthright. So if anybody tells you different, I want you to point them in my direction. Joy, in my firm belief, and I would love to debate this, is a state of mind. It is a conscious choice. And it can be found, as I'm illustrating in our story, in the midst of deep, deep sadness or in the midst of pure bliss, right? You can choose to connect with joy at any point of any day, of any week, of any month, of any year. It's really up to you when you want to activate it. And it's sitting right next to those limiting beliefs. So when we start to pick away at those limiting beliefs, joy almost multiplies. So first, I want to level set on what limiting beliefs are. I'll walk through how to discover and master self-love, how to identify those triggers before they strike, and how to incorporate self-love into a daily practice. And in doing research for this and other talks, really, I found that according to the National Science Foundation, our brains can produce as many as 50,000 thoughts per day. And that, I don't know, I have ADHD, so I actually think that number is low. But the interesting part about that is that 95% of these thoughts are repeated daily. So when you have that limiting belief, that story that's just on repeat, and we'll get into kind of the science behind that, not too deep, don't worry, I won't bore you, but it's important for you to know that a lot of the thoughts that you have are just habitually repeated. And limiting beliefs are judgments about yourself that you believe to be true. And I want to really stress that last part, that you believe to be true, because frankly, there's not a lot of truth in those limiting beliefs, and it's your perception of the situation that we need to unpack. So I'm curious when the last time you felt any of these things: less than, not good enough, unworthy, unlovable, insignificant, invisible, as though your input doesn't matter. When was the last time you felt that you didn't fit in or feel heard, or that you don't have time, or that you're too old or scared? And just simply drop that in the chat, and we'll keep going. But when it comes to discovering and mastering self-love, really what it comes down to is your mindset. Now, I'm proud and annoyed that mindset is becoming a trending topic. I'm annoyed because I don't want it to get diluted. But really, the greatest act of self-love is to no longer accept a life that you're unhappy with, but knowing that you are in full control of what that looks like. And that's really where your mindset comes into play. So I want to introduce you to my friend, the ego. You learned about the ego back in high school. So you learned about the id, the ego, and the superego. And this is about as deep as the science gets, don't worry. The ego is the part we're going to focus on today, and it's where all your memories are stored. It's like this huge supercomputer, and it just records, experiences and stories, and it just stores them for future use. It doesn't shut off, unfortunately. It works 24/7, but it's designed to keep you safe. So maybe when you were growing up, and maybe I'm dating myself now, but we had an electric, stovetop. And when the burner was red, I knew that if I put my hand on it, I would burn myself, because the ego served up a story that that was bad, that was dangerous. My mother had taught me not to go near the stovetop. And so the ego can really protect you and keep you safe, but it doesn't know when it's gone too far. It doesn't know limitations or boundaries. It can also easily be retrained. And I want to say for just a second that that was the most empowering part of my journey, when I realized, wait a second, if I told myself a story, I can just tell myself another story. I can tell myself anything I want. So really, digging into how you do that is what we'll be covering here shortly. But really, the key takeaway is that you hold the key to your own well-being. It's really up to you. If you're not happy with your situation, you can easily pivot and make a change. So self-sabotage is a big issue in the line of work that I do. And it's really about, the actions that occur as a result of those thoughts, as a result of those limiting beliefs. The actions undermine your goals, your success, your happiness, your well-being. And it really manifests itself in a lot of different ways. But, it's, the feeling when you feel like, oh, I'm not good enough. And you run to the pantry and you devour a whole bag of chips before you know it, right? That's self-sabotage. But, in short, it's the action you take as a result of the limiting belief. And I like to say this somewhat complicated phrase. You are hurting you because of a story you told yourself, the majority of which isn't true. And I don't say that from a shame perspective at all, so don't take it that way, but just a reality perspective. Like, all right, I told myself this story that I don't really think is right, that I don't feel good about. Well, then I should change it. Right. And, it takes, that logic to really start to, put your foot on the path towards making change. And where does self-sabotage show up? The answer is everywhere. It's in the things that you say, the things that you do, the things that you don't do, the food you eat, the company you keep, and the business you accept. And I added that one because I'm talking to a bunch of entrepreneurs. So it's also in the business you accept. And I would venture to guess we all have a story to tell there. But I want to impress upon you that the opposite of self-sabotage is self-love. So when you stop self-sabotaging, can't say that more than 3 times fast, you begin to develop that firm foundation of self-love. That's where it comes from. And it just grows over time. So how do you identify the triggers before they strike? Well, this is where we get into the SNAP method, and I think that was a teaser in the invite. They really want to get into kind of what it is, how it was developed, and give you a practical example. So the practical example, this little gem, I like to call "I can never do anything right." So let's say that's me. I'm going to the gym one morning. My kids are young, so they're still asleep, and my husband decides he wants to go at the same time. Well, he knew that the morning was my workout time. And so I said to him, look, if you're going to jump on my workout time, you need to go back and get the kids set up for the day. And I'll come back a little bit later, finish getting them ready and on the bus and off to school. And he's like, that's fine. That's fair. Well, this one day, we have our routine, we go to the gym, we do our workout. He leaves and I run into a friend. And I got talking to her for about, I don't know, 10 minutes. I get back in my car, I'm on the way home, and I get this spicy phone call. You've all had a spicy phone call. And if you know my husband, which I don't think any of you do, he is not a spicy guy. So shocking that I get a spicy phone call at like 6 o'clock in the morning. And he wants to know where I am. And I said, well, I'm on my way home. And he said, I'm late for getting into work. Well, he never told me he needed to be into work early that day. And so I just immediately blew up and said, I can never do anything right. And so, I get into the house, I'm all like in a huff. He's upset, the kids are upset, like the whole morning is destroyed. And that I can never do anything right story lasted the entire day. It was just, I must have told myself that story a million times that day. Until later on in the day, I took myself for a walk and I was like, I just feel so lousy. And this is such a stupid situation, truly. But I started to think about it and say, well, like, is it really true that I can never do anything right? Maybe I'm being a little hard on myself. So I was like, let's let the facts decide. So I went through in my mind and made a list of all the things I had done right that day, not to prove that I'm a perfectionist or I was right and he was wrong, but to really analyze the story. And when I came up with the list of things that I had done wrong, I came up with one. And it was that I hadn't called ahead and been respectful enough to say I was running a little bit late. So this I can never do anything right story immediately was disproved by the data. So this picture turned into this picture. And I was like, I do a lot of things right. Sure, I made some mistakes, in that case, one, but it's not true that I never do anything right. So I've got to stop doing that to myself. It's not fair and it's not factual. So the SNAP method was born around the time of this story, where I was looking for strategies that I could use to help myself in my own healing journey. I had a nutrition coach and he said, I'm not your therapist. and he wouldn't help me develop strategies to keep the weight off. And I thought, I can do this better than you. I know that. If you don't know, if you can't see the connection between your mindset and your food choices, like, you have missed the boat, my friend. So, you know, sometimes opportunity comes at an opportune time. So SNAP is an acronym, and S stands for stop. So when a trigger comes, and everybody has a different reaction when a trigger comes, but that feeling when you're just like, "Ugh, what is that?" Um, this is the time when you stop. You don't talk, you don't text, you don't type, you don't pick up your phone and start just like firing away, or your laptop, and you send a heated email off. You simply sit with the trigger and you break the thought pattern just by sitting with it. Just let it wash all over you. It's already here. You might as well. N stands for notice. And this is when I tell people to take out their journal. And I have to say, I used to be, kind of like, what's the point of journaling? I don't have time for that. No, you make the time, because this is where the healing happens. And it's a very powerful tool that is largely dismissed. So I'm telling you, as a former non-journaler, journal. It'll make your life a lot easier. But when these triggers strike, there's always a visceral response. So you get a physical response when the trigger strikes. Some people break out in a sweat, they start to shake, their voice will quiver. For me, I get it right in my throat. I get a lump in my throat, like a golf ball. But everybody has a different response. And this is where you record all the symptoms and all the stories as you believe them to be. So this is no time to judge, just write it all down. And I tell people to let the pen flow, but again, don't correct or judge what you've written. There is a psychological connection between your brain, your fingertips, the pen, and the paper that you just can't break, and you can't replicate it on a laptop. So it's really important you write it out. I know that's a bit old school, but there's a psychological reason behind that. But this is, again, where you record everything, your environment, the thing that was said, who said it, how it made you feel, the whole thing. And then once you've done that and time has settled a little bit, then you go back and the next step is accept or analyze. You go back and you review your entry, and you determine which comments are based on emotion and which one is based on an actual fact. So, you're starting to write and you're like, man, that's Sam. She really lit me up. And, you write all the things that you believe that she did. And you go back and you're like, would she really say it like that? Right? That's when you can start to analyze and really make some judgment calls, because you're trying to, prove and disprove the story. And with that data, that's exactly what you do. And once you've identified the trigger, then you can decide what you want to do with it. So when you pull on that thread and that not good enough story comes back up based on something, Sam said to you, you can look at it for what it really is, and then make a call as to whether or not you want to let that go. And that's obviously my vote, is letting it go. But my favorite step in this whole process is P, which is practice gratitude. You want to make sure that you thank the trigger for coming, because it's your body's way of saying that there's still more work to do. That you're not in complete alignment. You haven't let go of that story. When you have let go of that story, the same trigger comes, but then it just keeps going. Like, it just passes you by and you're like, hey, that used to really upset me. And now you know better. And when you know better, you do better. And for me, it keeps me really humble. It reminds me that above all else, I am human. And I have news for you all. You're all human too. And so these things happen. And, it's not anything you need to hold on to, because that is actually what's holding you back from realizing your true potential. So, how to incorporate self-love into a daily practice? I have become the master at this. And again, it was because I didn't have that guidance from somebody that I felt should have been giving it to me. So now I've made it my life's work to do that for other people. So, the first thing is examine your mindset for limiting beliefs. Make sure you journal and track the patterns. When you start to journal, you might not think anything of it in the beginning, but over time, you start to review your entries. You're able to track patterns and see where there might be, a limiting belief kind of like right under the surface. Mastering the SNAP method is the fastest way to freedom. And I can promise you that there is no better way to remove those limiting beliefs than to walk through it, really analyze it, and self educate and remove them from your life. And incorporate movement into every day. And I tell people this all the time. Working out is for your mental health. I'm also a personal trainer. I don't tell anybody to work out for vanity. It's really relatively ineffective. It's more effective to focus on your nutrition. So work out for your mental health, because when you work out, you are creating fresh, rich red blood cells that shoot straight up to your brain, producing serotonin, which is that feel-good hormone, right? So it's really important. If you want to work out because it brings you joy, because that does way more for your mental health than anything else ever would. The next thing is to start with just 3 things. And this can be so awkward if you've never done it before, but really practicing out loud, you have to do it out loud in the mirror, just 3 things that you like, sort of love about yourself. Because if you don't have self love, there's probably nothing you love about yourself. But at the very least, things you really like about yourself. And in the beginning, it might be like, I like my eyebrows, right? Like you can't really find anything. And so you kind of pick something really basic. That's fine. But do that every day. And before you know it, you're going to start to see yourself with much kinder eyes. And that is key as you develop that self love foundation. Be unapologetically selfless. Like, I don't know if I could put that in Vegas lights to make it more obvious, but like that is so important. So many people, working moms are probably the worst at this, putting themselves first. By putting yourself first, you give those around you the very best of yourself, not the worst. And maybe working dads are the same, but I can't speak for you. I can only speak for me, which is a working mom. But I always feel like, wow, I'll put myself last because everybody else needs something. And, then they'll be okay. And then I'll focus on myself. Well, doing that got me to, unspeakable weights, and it obviously, affected my mental health greatly. So put yourself first, and they will be, the greatest benefactors of that. And you'll see them grow exponentially as well. Above all, I want you to start small, because transformation, which is what this is the culmination of these tiny incremental changes that stack up over time. So much of your mental health resides in your gut, which is your small intestine. So much of that is related to your mental health. When your gut is not in check, as I like to call it, when it's not operating at its best, most efficient capacity, your hormones aren't created and absorbed properly. So then they're not making it up to the brain. So gut health is a really important place to start. And that's probably what I would say is the fastest way to make a dent into your mental health journey. Physical fitness as well, just getting those red blood cells moving. And so whatever that means to you, do it, but do it from a place of joy. And if you don't like to work out, then don't. You're only going to come to resent something that is forced upon you. So do something that you enjoy. And then the mindset shift, so important, because again, that's where you see and are able to realize your full potential. And of course, the saying, if you think you can or you think you can't, you're right, applies here. So my gifts to you, I would love if you could follow me on Instagram. There I post daily motivational tips and videos. You can download a free copy of Crush Limiting Beliefs, and I have the link here, and we'll make sure we can send that out as well. If you want to set up time to discuss more, this is my Calendly link. And I'd love to invite you to be on my show. So I have a TV show and a podcast called Joy Unleashed. And it goes out on, hang on, I have to remember, Apple, Amazon Fire, Roku, YouTube, all my social media channels, and then the podcast network. And so would love to have a discussion about being on my show. And for those that are on the call today, hopefully I caught all of you in the registration. Accept my connection request on Alignable and feel free to join my group called the Daily Dose of Joy, where I try to put just daily, like thought-provoking posts, sometimes inspirational, sometimes action-oriented, but just a little dose of joy in your otherwise very busy, overscheduled day. And then finally, I'd love to share a link to my journal, the Daily Dose of Joy journal. I'm super proud of it. It's an Amazon bestseller, and that link is here. And that's it.